Nipper Away Dharma Talks.
Talk 8, 26th of August 2012. Right concentration. Professor Geoffrey Hunt talks about here and now.
Last time we were talking about concentration and breathing and how to go about breathing, which corresponds basically to the breathing techniques you find in yoga and hatha yoga in particular. It involves the abdomen, so the diaphragm is right across here, and when the diaphragm contracts, you pull in air. But we're trying to involve the abdomen as well. So what I suggested, which is the traditional, actually pre-Buddhist way of breathing to bring about concentration of the mind, is to emphasize the exhalation. So you pull in your tummy as you breathe out, so you give an extra little push out, and then there's a golden moment when you can just wait in suspension for a second or two when you've exhaled the air, and just go into that moment and just let thought go, and it's just a moment of stillness and peace. That's the direction we want to go in, so we're always trying to expand that golden moment of stillness and peace. When you exhale, just hold it for a second or two and let the mind stay in peace. Let everything go. It's a short moment, but the length of it doesn't actually matter. It's important to try to develop that stillness. Now, when you breathe in, you just let the body do what it wants, because you've breathed out and you've expelled a bit more air. Now the body will take in as much air as it needs. So breathing in will just go, right, and then the belly comes out. So there's this motion with the belly going in as the breath comes out, and then the belly goes out as the breath comes in. So it's like a bellows. You try to involve the belly as well. And all the time, the mind is watching this process. As the Buddha says in the Mahapatipatthana Sutta, he says that the whole body of breathing, you're watching the whole process, you're doing so with awareness. I know that I'm breathing. I know that I'm breathing. He emphasizes then, know that I'm breathing, which means that I'm paying attention to it. I'm not thinking about breathing, but I'm paying attention to it. I'm doing it with awareness, so I'm conscious of it. Actually, I'm so conscious of it that everything else drops away, and I do so clearly, with clarity. Now, what I want to talk about today is that golden moment, that stillness at the top of the breath when you've just exhaled, because this takes us into the idea of here and now. So what I want to talk about today is this idea of here and now as it relates to Dharma practice, as it relates to meditation, as it relates to concentration in particular. We hear this expression here and now a lot, and I'd just like to connect it with the idea that when we exhale, we just have a second or two of holding the breath. Well, not holding the breath actually, it's just resting because the breath has gone out. So the diaphragm is relaxing, and just stay in that stillness. Now, we could describe that as a here and now moment. Now, you will hear this expression, here and now, quite a lot in Buddhist circles, or meditation circles. It's a favorite, isn't it? Here and now, here and now. We hear it until it's just become a slogan. We don't want things to become slogans. We want to understand the meaning of them, and here and now does mean something, but when it turns into a slogan, there's a danger that we think we know what it means when we've actually stopped thinking about what that means, or we have lost the experience of it. So what I want to talk about is this expression here and now. In my reading of the classical text, the Tipitaka, I don't see this phrase here and now anywhere actually, but it has become a popular phrase, and it does mean something. It's a label on a door which we can open to understand some aspect of the Buddha's teaching. I want to start by giving you a story of a special moment in the life of the Buddha, and that is when he came to the end of his life. He had spent 45 years wandering about in what is now northeast India. It wasn't India at that time. It's the plain of the Ganges. There were kingdoms at that time, and he was born in a small kingdom called the Sakya, in which is what is now Nepal. He wandered through areas, mainly the area of Magadha and the area of Kosala, which had chiefs or kings, if you like. But life at that time was very different from life now. It was largely rural. Wasn't that much conflict as we know it today. And he wandered around that area, over an area that's about 200 miles wide. And of course, he didn't get in a taxi. He walked. He walked basically along what is a trade route through that area. And when you read the Tipitaka, you can see references to all the place names, which are still recognizable places and which you can still go to on a pilgrimage. And there were 1 or 2 people here that have indeed been on pilgrimage to those areas. And last night we showed a movie about a Tibetan monk who followed that path through the places where the Buddha was born, in Lumbini, to where he was enlightened in Bodh Gaya, to where he eventually died in Kushinara. When he was approaching 80 years of age and knew that he was going to die shortly, didn't feel so well, I suppose, and had 1 or 2 of his followers with him. I think it might have been Sariputta, I'm not sure, maybe it was Ananda, but he had a follower with him, and he said that I can see that I'm going to die shortly. Now, this is relevant to here and now, because where was he, and what was the significance of this time for him? He approached a small village or hamlet, Kushinara, which Sariputta felt was not an appropriate place for him to die. And as they approached Kushinara, his follower said, please don't die here. We don't want you to die here. This is nowhere. This is just an insignificant little place that no one really knows or remembers. We want you to die somewhere important. So this is the here, isn't it? This is the here, that we're always concerned about the here rather than the there, or the there rather than the here, that we attach great importance to places. In fact, the whole idea of going on a pilgrimage is the idea of there's something important over there, but not so important over here, in this building in Guildford. Why should anything important be going on here? The there is surely much more important than the here. Now, the Buddha doesn't think like other people. As he was approaching Kushinara, he says, well, wherever I die, that's where I die. And Kushinara is not so far away. I'm quite happy with Kushinara, let's go to Kushinara. He'd had a meal, and the idea is that it was the meal that brought about his demise, but there are other views that he was just coming to the end of his life. He was an old man, and that he probably had what's called a mesenteric infarct, that is where the blood vessels around the gut become very weak and burst, and that is what he died from. But again, does that matter? He was 80 years old, which for that time was a very old age indeed. And this is a man that had lived only on the food donated by other people, probably only ate once a day. When they reached Kushinara, obviously he was very, very ill, and he was clearly dying, and there was a little bit of unhappiness that he was going to die in this small village and he should be dying somewhere else. And he told them a story about how once upon a time Kushinara was actually on the major trade route and was a major city, and that the king of that area was an enlightened person. And of course what the Buddha was doing here was giving a story to keep his followers happy and say, look, it is important after all. What is actually important about here or there? Does it really matter? That is the question that he was really raising. We think there are many heres, many theres, many nows. The whole point that he was trying to do was to bring us to wherever we are, whenever we are, is as important as anywhere else. In fact, probably that's the only important moment, that every moment is important, and the moment that you're in is the important moment for you. We could spend our time wishing that we were somewhere else, or wishing that we were in a different time. So we wish that maybe when we look back that I were still a child, or I were in happier times, or that I hadn't done certain things, or I hadn't behaved so foolishly. So there will be regrets, there will be a lot of thinking about the past, and when I'm living that in my head, I am not now. Or I may be thinking about the future. So I would be fantasizing about the future, I would be planning for the future, and when I'm in the future, I'm not now. Now, we're all very good at this, aren't we? If only we could calibrate our minds and actually measure how much time we spend in the past and the future in our minds, it would probably be an alarmingly high figure. The amount of time that we are actually spending where we are now, in our minds, is probably a small fraction of that. Now, the Buddha says that's where you discover things about yourself, where you discover things about life, you discover things about self, about selflessness, about the roots of suffering, unhappiness, bewilderment, and you discover things about how to move out of that into stillness, peace, harmony, acceptance, compassion for yourself and others. We need to let go of that past orientation. We need to let go of that future orientation. There is no more important moment than now. So as I'm speaking, this is the important moment. This is the important moment. I don't mean just for me, I mean for you, for each of us, this is the important moment. Here in this room, in Guildford, this is the important place to be. Where would you rather be? Is there somewhere more important? Would we be learning better if we were in Nepal or India or Japan? I don't know, I don't think so, because you're the guys learning. The learning process is within you. It's not in a temple in Japan. It's not in a forest in Thailand. If you go there, you will carry with you the same apparatus that you've got now. You'll carry with you yourself and whatever that self is, and you will have to do the same, exactly the same inner work to dissolve that self, and loosen it up, and be connected with everything else. That's the real here and now. That's the really important place, is that place within. So the Buddha did die in Kushinara. And of course, subsequently, it became a very famous place, precisely because he did die there. That's not really the point, however. This is a point about it's an instruction to you. The instruction is, let go of thinking about the past and the future and pay attention to what you are right now, who you think you are, your states of mind, your thoughts. Look into them and see for yourself how you are generating your own anxiety, your own worries, your own sense perhaps of wanting something or other, and its opposite, of not wanting something. Sometimes it's not wanting a particular person, or not wanting particular people, or not wanting where one lives, or not wanting certain relatives that one has, or not wanting one's job. But then it's also the opposite, wanting perhaps a different partner. I have a fantasy about that. I'm meeting somebody wonderful that's going to turn my life around. Does that actually, is that a fruitful way to think, rather than looking at what's right in front of us? We are creatures of fantasy. We fantasize. We want. We're in a state of want. And if you're in a state of want, you're in a state of lack. It means something is missing. What's missing is the thing I want. If I'm in a state of lack, I'm unhappy, because I'm not getting what I want. And when I get it, it doesn't quite match up to what I thought it would be like. And all of this is spinning around. And the one thing I'm not doing is being where I am, here and now. There are no problems except the problems I create for myself. Of course, things can happen to me, but then I am free in my attitude to what happens to me. So I still have choices. So the phrase here and now, if it means anything, is an instruction. It's an instruction to you to let go of thinking about the past and the future and pay attention to your own states of mind, your own construction and reconstruction of yourself. See, everything in the Buddha is an instruction. He is not a philosopher. He is not trying to tell us what the ultimate nature of reality is, despite how this is presented in some Buddhist books. He is not saying, really, it's all here and now, or reality is nothing but here and now. He doesn't say anything like that. He's giving you a practical instruction. He says he's only interested in one thing, human suffering, and how to understand it, and ameliorate it, or even end it, if that's possible. That's all he's interested in. So that's practical. So here and now is an instruction about clinging and letting go of clinging. Now if we think of this in meditational terms, what are we doing when we're practicing concentration or practicing mindfulness? If you've got the instruction about breathing and you've exhaled and you have that moment before you inhale again and you let everything drop out, is that here and now? Is there any here and now in that? There is no here in it because there's no Guildford in it. There's no now in it because you're not looking at your watch. So actually we have to draw the conclusion that even here and now isn't here and now. There is an ancient teaching in which a philosopher called Heraclitus, a Greek philosopher, pointed out that everything seems to be changing. Nothing's permanent. Well, he was a philosopher. He was trying to understand the nature of reality, which the Buddha wasn't trying to do. He pointed out that if you stand on the banks of a river and the river is moving by, you can't dip your toe into it twice, into the same river twice. The time you've taken your toe out and put your toe in again, it's a different river. Now that sounds quite profound. But the Buddha goes a step further than this in our thinking, that if we're really paying attention to our inner experience, and that is that you can't put your foot into the same river once. Because if you put it in there once, where is the place that it stopped? Where is the place that is the place? Well, there isn't one. So paradoxically, there isn't really even a here and now. See, the Buddha isn't interested in questions of reality. He's giving you an instruction. He's saying, let go of past and future. And attend to, if you like, the fine grain of your experience. And when you do that, a strange thing happens. Yourself, the idea that I'm somehow trapped in here in my body, it dissolves. That I will become interconnected with everything. Becoming interconnected with everything means I'm in a space that isn't a space. I'm in a time that isn't a time. Now in meditation, in concentration meditation, which is something we learn as we go on, we focus on the breathing, we stay with the breathing, gradually the mind becomes very still, it becomes very concentrated, and it begins to enter a sphere. The Buddha calls it a sphere. Yoga teachers call it a sphere of infinite space. Now this is an interesting place to be, because you're aware, but there are no things in that space. You're in a space that has no things in it. So here is a bell, here is a stick, here is a clock, here is a watch. These are things in space. Now imagine you're in a space which all the things disappear, no things in it. You will still have some wispy thoughts about the experience. And what will occur to you is that if there are no things, is this really a space? If there's nothing, no things in it to identify it as a space, is it actually a space? Is it a space at all? You see, a space is made up of here and there. This is here, that is there. Now annihilate all things. Now I have no means of putting things into relation to each other. It's not a place, it's not a space, it's not empty, it's not full. But I'm still aware. Now it gets more interesting, because think about this. Not only has here disappeared, there has disappeared, but time has disappeared. Because how do I know about time? It's by things moving in space. I have to have a clock with a hand going around. If there are no things, then I couldn't measure time. Time has gone. Time has disappeared. This is very strange, isn't it? So it's as though time and space have disappeared. It's what you might call framelessness. Frameless. There's no frame. There's no frame of reference for there to be a here and a now. So despite what you might read in some Buddhist books, yes, we move towards here and now in the sense that we are letting go of past and future, but even here and now is gone. We're just in a perfectly still place. Now, if that's gone, then I've gone. But something is still kind of aware. There's still kind of an awareness. Now, these are actual experiences that one can have by meditating very seriously for long periods. So it's an actual experience, but it's paradoxical because you might ask, well, who is having this experience? Don't know what the answer is to that. But it is something that is there when one meditates, and it could be life-changing because our whole sense of who we are, what life is about, is based on certain assumptions. When those assumptions drop away, then we are left in a perfectly blissful, peaceful, still place. And when we come back, then things don't look quite the same as they did. Now, how is that possible? What has happened to me if, through meditation, I start to understand the assumptions upon which my life is built? Do I start walking on water? No, of course not. Life goes on the same as it was before. But something has changed because my perspective has changed. So although I go on as before, I go on as before in a different spirit, with a different heart, with a different mind. I'll give you an analogy for that. If I'm walking along, imagine life as a path. I'm walking through life. It's some sort of journey in which I move from here to there, in which I move from past into future. There's a sense that I'm walking along, and I want to go faster. Why do I want to go faster? Because there's something I want, and I'm going to get it. And then I get disappointed, and then I'm hurt. So then I think of something else that I want. And I'm running along like this. But what if at deeper level there is no here and there, no now, no future, no past, at a deeper level? How would I get a sense of this? Well, imagine that as I'm running along at the bottom here, I think I'm going somewhere, progress is being made, and then we zoom out from there, and what we see is a gigantic treadmill that's turning around like this. And I'm just like a little ant that's running along at the very bottom of the treadmill, and the treadmill's going around, and it's just a cycle. It's not going anywhere. But because I have no perspective, I'm a little ant at the bottom of the treadmill, I think I'm going somewhere. I think I'm going to get something. And when I get it, I'm going to be happier. But through meditational experience, I get a different perspective. Something has changed for me because I have a different perspective. But in a sense, life goes on the same as before. I will still be the little ant running along at the bottom, but now I run along perhaps in a slightly different way because now I've got the whole picture. So I think, yeah, this is a bit of a silly game, isn't it? All of us running along here. You know, we don't have to beat each other up about it. I don't have to beat myself up about it, but, well, let's carry on and have some fun while we're at it. You know, the perspective changes. It's not that you can walk on water. What it is a zooming out and having a much wider perspective on everything. That throws light on here and now, that wider perspective. Because now one knows that as one is moving into the future, that future is going around and around. It's an illusion. And all my worries and regrets about the past, where is that? I don't need to make myself unhappy. I don't need to make others unhappy. I don't need to compete and quarrel with others over things we want or things we don't want, or how we want things to be. Things are the way they are. What we should be doing is caring for each other, making life easier for each other as human beings. That's what we should be doing. And that is what we could be doing if we had a wider perspective. So that's the real meaning of that phrase, here and now.
New Buddha Way approaches meditation as a way of life, letting go of East and West, past and future, and starting afresh here and now. To find out more, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.